Advanced warning. I have two puppies and an old dog in my house right now, so there's a likelihood you're going to hear some weird noises um, because they're loud animals. So just fair warning. You guys can hear me, right? Okay. What the hell, Ben? Are you murdering her? Screeches. That's concerning, bro. Y'all can unmute if you want. If you guys want to talk, you're okay. Plausible deniability, Ben. It's the most important two words you'll ever learn in your life. Plausible deniability. Google it. Haircut. I look like I'm about to guest on Joe Rogan's podcast right now. That's not a good thing. He's stupid. Hey, it's 10 o'clock. Yay. Let's hope other people show up. This is being recorded, so if y'all miss something or if something doesn't sink in for you, you can go back and watch it later. I'll post it in Moodle later. So I'm also trying this cool new feature in Zoom where my background is the slides. So you can really kind of get into the whole I don't know, technology, I guess. I don't know. I didn't know how to finish that sentence when I started it, and now here we are. Just a really uncomfortable position. So, sorry, it's weird. Again, everything evolved around me is weird. That's just the nature of the beast. This is our first Zoom session. Like I said, we want to be face to face as much as we can, but things happen. There's a lot of things I don't have control over. So here we are. But on the plus side, you get to see my whole face. And that's good, right? That's a good thing, seeing my face. Yeah, that's not really, it's horrific, and I apologize. All right, guys. Well, today we're talking about what would be chapter 2 if we had a textbook, and thus the chapter 2. Okay. This is like doing the weather. I got to figure out where left and right is. That's why it says chapter 2 in parentheses there. And this is about media literacy in the digital age. And media literacy is an incredibly important concept, not just in mass communication, not just in media, but really in society in general. It's part of the reason why I feel a class like this should be required, not just for selfish reasons, not just because of job security, but I think media literacy is an incredibly important skill in the 21st century. And not nearly enough people have been exposed to that concept, let alone kind of had depth of understanding of that concept. So you guys are special. You're special. You're the leaders of tomorrow because you're going to know what media literacy is, and a lot of your peers aren't. And it's going to suck for them because they're going to be left behind on a lot of important things as society moves forward. So what is media literacy? What are we talking about when we say media literacy? Media literacy is, and again, this is a lengthy definition, don't feel you have to write it all down, the process of interacting with and critically analyzing media content by considering its particular presentation, its underlying political or social messages, and its ownership or regulation issues that may affect what is presented and in what form. In other words, media literacy is understanding media from an insider's perspective, right? We have to look at media in a enlightened way, in an informed way. One of my great frustrations because of my point of view, to go back to the critical thinking lecture, is that because I'm trained in media and because I've worked in media, I see people all the time talk about the media, right? And they're like, oh, the media is doing this and the media is doing that. And it drives me up a wall. It just drives me completely insane because these people have no idea what the hell they're talking about. I just said to somebody yesterday on social media, because they were like, oh, keep believing what the media tells you. I said, have you ever been in a newsroom? Have you ever actually been in a newsroom? Do you have any idea how the process works of getting news from whether it's print or radio or television or internet? Have you ever seen how that process works? Because the answer is 99 times out of 100, no. So they're talking out their ass, right? You can't truly appreciate or understand all of the things that go into media until you understand the workings of media, until you understand the business side of media, until you understand the process of how that information gets out. So when we're talking about media literacy, we're talking about how to understand media from a more informed, more enlightened position by not only understanding how it works, but understanding a lot of those subtleties of the business of media. It's not just as simple as I turn on the news and they're all talking about this story, therefore there's a narrative they're pushing. No, that is lazy as hell. It is often completely off the mark from reality and based in more conspiracy theory than reality. So media literacy is incredibly important because, as we've mentioned a few times in this class, media is so ubiquitous, right? We are constantly bombarded by media in the 21st century United States, and therefore we should know more about it. Right? We should be more informed about this thing that plays such an incredibly important role in our lives. It's kind of like how, when at some point in your life, you kind of want to know more about your family, right? You want to know more about your parents or your genealogy or, your culture. We all have that moment of like, man, I want to know as much as I can about what makes me me, right? We all have that kind of identity drive. Well, and the reason we have that is because it plays such an important role in who we are. Knowing about my parents helps me to understand me. Knowing about my family lineage helps me to understand me. Knowing about the media I consume helps me to understand my mentality, helps me to understand my thought process, my psychology. And so media literacy is incredibly important to understanding ourselves, but also to understanding the society at large. Because again, media plays an incredibly important role in culture, plays an incredibly important role in the society at large. And if I can understand the media that my society is consuming, I can better understand my society. There's a relationship there. There's a dynamic there that I have to truly understand or get to if I want to understand larger problems as a whole. I probably should have said this at the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm just burping in my mouth right now. I probably should have said this in the beginning, but if at any point you guys have a question or a comment or anything, just unmute and talk. If you guys are getting annoying, I'll mute you. I'm not worried about it while I fix my hat like an idiot. So feel free, guys, to talk. If you have any questions, interrupt me. It's cool. So that's what media literacy is, right? Media literacy is this idea that we should know more about the media because of its significance in who we are and who our society becomes. Media literacy is also highly concerned with a concept I mentioned on Wednesday, and that is semiotics, right? Semiotics is the study of symbols, right? And semiotics argues that all symbols have two things. They have a signifier and a signified. The signifier meaning the symbol itself, right? What I'm looking at. The signified is the meaning behind it. And the example I used in class on Wednesday was an octagon, right? We see an 8-sided object, we go, oh, it's a stop sign. Well, it isn't really, right? It isn't really a stop sign. There's nothing inherent about an octagon that makes you want to not move. It's a conditioned response because that symbol has power. All symbols have power. And semiotics theory is an incredibly important aspect of understanding media literacy because we have to look at those elements of media as symbols, right? It's not just a word. That word has a signified. That word is a symbol. And that symbol has a lot of weight and a lot of significance for the people who are taking it in from that culture. And that's an important part of semiotics. Semiotics is dependent upon culture. You don't understand the symbols of a culture you've never been involved with, right? Like if I put up a bunch of Japanese characters, a bunch of kanji on the screen right now, you have no idea what the hell that is, right? It's just a bunch of random shapes. Well, that's because you're not embedded in that culture. You can see the signifier very easily, right? You can see the shape very easily, but the signified doesn't exist for you because nobody has shared it with you. All symbols are an expression of shared experience. When we see something in media representation, it's important that we understand the culture that's presenting it, because the culture that's presenting it is the one that's signified purpose or meaning is relevant here. The word freedom in American culture is an incredibly important concept, right? Americans feel very differently. We have a very different signified experience with the word freedom than, say, someone in North Korea, right? Or someone in Iran. It's the same signifier, right? It's the same word. It's the same combination of sounds, but it has a totally different meaning for us because of our cultural experiences, because of our cultural heritage. With that in mind, we need to remember those things when we look at media, when we engage in media, when we try to be more informed consumers of media. What is the signified, not just the signifier, right? It's not just what word they're using, but what does that word represent to the people who used it? That changes the game entirely, right? To think about when a journalist uses the phrasing police-involved shooting, that's a symbol, right? The signifier is just the phrase police-involved shooting. But what is signified? What is meant? What is the meaning behind that phrase as opposed to shooting, right? Why that signifier? What does that carry with it on the back end? When we talked about critical thinking, that was one of the 8 structures of Jesus. Sorry, I'm in my basement and somebody just moved a chair and it felt like the ceiling was going to fall on me. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. What was I? Shit. There's a thing I was just saying about a thing with the. Don't get old. Don't get old. You forget everything. Everything just disappears on you. As I've mentioned a few times in this class, I'll move on to the next part. There's a lot going on in the world right now that serves as a perfect opportunity to look at these concepts in motion, right? Look at them in the real world. Look at them in action. And I have a couple of examples of interesting signifiers and signified that have come up in media in the last little bit that we'll look at in a minute here. But I just want to kind of prime you for that, start thinking about that idea of it's not just the words they use, but what is it that the author is trying to get at with those words or with those images? Another important concept that is very much along the same lines here is a concept known as framing, media framing. And that is the presentation and communication of a message in a particular way that influences our perception of it. Again, when you think about, we talked about, with critical thinking, we talked about the idea of inferences, right? And how we immediately make a judgment because of our experience with that term or with that concept or with that image, right? My wife, right? The example I use was my wife. I'm not able to call her Heather, right? I can't call her by her name, not because the word itself is bad, but because she has a negative association with my history with the word Heather, right? Framing is basically the media's usage of inference on purpose, right? Sometimes that framing is very deliberate, and sometimes that framing is very subconscious, right? The way a message is presented is just as important as the message itself. The way I describe a thing is just as important as the thing I'm describing. It's very psychological, right? It gives you an insight into the mentality of the communicator when you look at how they're presenting the idea. And you all know this implicitly. You all know this in your basic experiences with other human beings. If you're talking to your significant other, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, your whatever, and they say, yeah, I'm really sorry. You don't believe them. They're not getting away with that, right? How they present it matters, right? One of the things that your generation does that I will just never, ever understand, don't want to understand it, to be perfectly frank, is the idea of a promposal. When that started a few years ago, I wept. I was like, all right, our society's damned. We're done. These elaborate, well, you got a problem with me? Here's the pickup truck and my friend's spelling it out. Why? What? Why? Why are you going through all that effort just to be like, hey, you want to like hang out at an uncomfortable dance for 3 hours? Like, that's why. Right? But that's become an expected norm now, right? Kids have to go all out. Why? Because the presentation is going to change the way that person might perceive the message, right? The hope is that, look, if you look at all the effort I put into asking you out to this incredibly shitty experience that high schoolers go through, you're more likely to say yes. Because look at all the effort I put into it, right? I framed it in a way that makes it easier for you to accept. It makes it easier for you to agree. A side effect of framing is what's known as the echo effect. And the echo effect is actually one of the few terms that we deal with that actually has started to have a little bit of mainstream crossover. You actually hear people outside of academic circles talking about the echo effect, but they refer to it as the echo chamber. You may have heard of the echo chamber. The idea that, and I mentioned this the other day, because of convergence, we're now able to never expose ourselves to contradictory ideas or to challenging ideas. I can now live in an entire media population of just people who are going to tell me what I already think, who are just going to agree and reaffirm my belief system. And that's because I look for the way they frame the story, right? It's an immediate implicit thing we do is we look at the way the story is framed to determine if we're going to continue reading it, continue watching it, right? We see, okay, we can tell by how they're talking about this thing or by what images they're using. We can tell very quickly and very easily if this is something that's going to make me feel good about what I believe, or if this is something that's going to make me really kind of worry about what I believe. And so framing has an incredibly important role to play in how we engage with the media. And it's also something that is used deliberately by media sources. They frame it a certain way as kind of a signal to their audience, hey, this is for you, right? This is going to be something you'll feel good about at the end of, as opposed to something you'll kind of feel icky about because now I might not be right. God forbid, I might not be right. Brilliantly enough, when we get into entertainment media, things like film and television, they do a brilliant job of framing issues in such a way that you're able to be persuaded without realizing it. In particular, science fiction, fantasy, those are genres of entertainment that are very, very, very persuasive. There's a significant amount of messaging, social and cultural messaging in sci-fi, fantasy, even horror, right? Even horror films. But it's not framed as, I'm going to tell you why racism is bad, right? It's framed as, look at this fun adventure. And because it's framed as, look at this fun little experience, little party we're going to have, we let our guard down. And we don't think of it as persuasion. We don't think of it as social messaging. We think of it as like, oh yeah, I'm really invested in this character. And that influences the way we tend to feel about the subject matter that they're addressing underneath the surface. I mentioned, I'm a big MCU fan. I'm a big comic book guy. My collection's just over there, actually. I love all of the MCU movies. I even love all of the non-MCU Marvel movies. Deadpool, big fan of Deadpool. I love that line in Deadpool 2 where, if you've seen it, no spoilers here, but if you've seen it, Deadpool and Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Longest Name Ever show up at the Essex house to try and take down the kid. And they arrive and Deadpool says, everybody relax, we're here. It's the X-Men, an outdated metaphor for racism from the 60s. Because that's exactly what it was. It's exactly what it was, right? The whole premise of the X-Men, the whole premise of that group, of that comic book is, look at how stupid it is. Look at how harmful it is. Look at how bad it is to segregate people who are different than us, to fight a war against people who are different than us. It is. The whole series, I mean, obviously today they don't push upon that message, but it's inherent. It's inherent in the very message of it. And so the media, even in entertainment, uses framing very effectively to get a message across to us without us always realizing they're even getting a message to us, let alone what that message is. So I mentioned that there have been some examples in recent media that really kind of highlight this, and I'm going to put that up in the next slide. And we're going to walk through this, right? These are all very recent, real-world examples of media framing and how we need to be kind of more deliberately, proactively looking at and recognizing some of that framing. On the top here, right, the very, very top one, right? My hand won't go up that high because the green screen cuts off. Can you stop interrupting? Mr. Cuomo said to her at one point. Can you stop lying? Miss Nixon snapped back. Do you notice anything, I guess, interesting about the phrasing and how that was written up? What do you guys think? Somebody unmute. Somebody talk, damn it. What's interesting about that phrasing between those two individuals?
I guess it says at one point for when she asks if you can stop interrupting, as if it kind of just happened, not really immediately, and then snapped back as like an immediate knee-jerk response.
Yep.
It's kind of a big difference in personality.
Exactly, right? Mr. Cuomo said to her at one point. That's the way you describe a calm, rational person. Snapped back is not how you describe a calm, rational person. Very, very, very subtle, very small phrasing changes the way an audience will interpret that recall. Mr. Cuomo said to her at one point, the male reporter is being described in a rational, calm way. The female candidate is described as snapping. That's awkward, right? That reinforces a very negative stereotype about men and women in America, right? The old expression that, if a man does it, he's a boss. If a woman does it, she's a bitch, right? Mr. Cuomo said to her at one point, Miss Nixon snapped back. That's a small phrasing, right? Most of us would read that and not think twice about it. But think about the picture that paints. Think about the way that frames this conversation between the two of them, right? The two images just happened, right? This just happened. This just happened 2 days ago. This was on Wednesday, right? The New York Post. So it's the exact same newspaper, right? And you've noticed the timestamps at the bottom here, right? The New York Post at 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday put up a story about suspected teen gunman Kyle Rittenhouse spotted cleaning graffiti. But then 2 hours later, look how they describe the guy who got shot 7 times. Oh, look, see, the cops were okay. They did the right thing. Look at how good of a white boy this kid is. But that guy had a knife in his car. He had a knife in his car. Do you think that's weird? I mean,
yes.
You should see that as weird. You should see that as very, very, very weird. I have a knife in my car? Would that be the story? If I got shot by police this afternoon, do you think the New York Post would run a story or would write a headline that, like, oh, he had a knife in his car?
No.
No, of course not. My wife is obsessed with real crime, right? This true crime stuff. She finds a case and she fixates on it, just completely fixates on it. And her most recent fixation was the, oh my God, of course we're going to blank on his name in this very moment. Chris Watts. If you guys don't remember, Chris Watts is the guy in Colorado who murdered his wife and children, but told the police that they disappeared, right? And so for like 2 or 3 days, there was this massive like, oh my God, where are these people? What happened? Well, then they find out, like, oh, he killed them and put them in barrels and put them at his job site. His wife, his 2 young daughters, and his wife who was pregnant. But when the newspapers and the television stations were doing stories about Chris Watts, they used pictures of him with his family in the story, not his mugshot. They put up pictures. I mean, Google right now, you're at a computer, Google Chris Watts, and you'll see all these family photos of Chris Watts. And the stories are all about, how could this have happened? This was such a normal family. They all seem to love each other. Oh my God, how could this have possibly happened? That's what all the stories were about Chris Watts, right? At the same time the Chris Watts trial was going on, there was a man in Georgia who caught someone else attempting to sexually assault his daughter in a public restroom, right? His 6-year-old daughter. His 6-year-old daughter went into a bathroom and someone was in there and attempted to sexually assault her. This man ran in when he heard his daughter scream and started assaulting the man who was sexually assaulting his daughter. He ended up killing him, right? He ended up killing the guy while trying to protect his daughter. His picture in the newspaper was his mugshot. It wasn't a picture of him with his daughter. It wasn't a family photo. It wasn't something they took off of his Facebook or his Instagram. They used his mugshot. You want to guess what color he was? Do you want to guess the race of Chris Watts versus the man from Georgia?
Black.
Shocker. Who would have thought? The mugshot was the black man. Chris Watts is white, therefore we show his family. And these aren't one-off cases. These aren't one-off situations. This isn't just this like, oh, it just happened that one time. Every day. Every day. We talked about this in class the other day. Like, we've normalized the images of dead black bodies. We haven't normalized the image of dead white bodies. And that says a lot. That should tell you a lot about American society. What we consider to be palatable and not. How we frame a story. This motherfucker shot 3 people. He was walking. He went to Kenosha with a rifle. He lives in Antioch, Illinois, right? He lives in the suburbs of Chicago, kind of the suburbs of Chicago. He went out of his way to go to Kenosha and ends up shooting 3 people, killing 2. But the story that they're running is, look, he was cleaning up graffiti beforehand. Did you guys know that this guy, Kyle Rittenhouse, did you guys know that he's actually a criminal? Like, before he killed 2 people, he was a criminal? He has a criminal record. Yeah, he has a criminal record. Why isn't that the story? You know all about the criminal history of every black man that gets killed. That is the story. The story is, look, he was a criminal. Jacob Blake was a bad guy. He fucking killed 2 people. And we don't talk about his criminal background? That's telling. That's framing. That's the power of subliminal and subconscious framing that we do in American media. And we need to be more mindful of it. We need to be more aware of these things. Because you can't be an informed media consumer and not pay attention to how that story is told. No different than if you have a friend who's having a fight or a struggle with their significant other, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their husband, their wife, their whoever it is, and they're telling you their side of the story. Hopefully you're reasonable enough to understand that the way they tell that story is going to be a little bit shaded, right? They're not going to tell you the whole story. They're going to tell you the stuff that makes them look good. Hopefully you realize that nobody's going to tell a story they're involved with completely accurately. And not just because, people are shit, not because people are terrible people, because we're human. We don't know all sides of it. We have natural implicit biases for ourselves and self-protective biases that we engage in. Hopefully you understand that there's a difference between what happened and what's relayed to you when your friend is telling you that story or when your family member is telling you that story. It's no different than when the media presents a story. They have a shading that they're going to put on that story for a particular reason. Sometimes it's very deliberate. Sometimes it's very incidental. Sometimes it's a reflection of biases that they didn't even know they had. And sometimes it's a very deliberate attempt to shade an issue or to create a story in a particular direction. Holy shit, there's a lot of you here all of a sudden. What happened? Where did all these people come from? Oh no, Trent's here. Shit. I mean, hey Trent, what's up, buddy? For the people who just got here, you guys can unmute if you want to. If you got something to say, please jump in, speak your piece by all means. So just FYI. All right, next. Another important aspect of media literacy is what we call media grammar. Right, and media grammar is defined as the underlying rules, structures, and patterns by which a medium presents itself and is used and understood by the audience. The likelihood is that if you've ever heard the term grammar, you've heard it in reference to like language, right? Like when you take English 121 or you take writing comp or any kind of English class in high school, middle school, they teach you about the rules of grammar, right? Well, grammar isn't just a language-specific term. It's the whole concept here of the rules and structures and patterns. So just as there's a grammar to language, right? Like English has a grammar, French has a grammar, Portuguese has a grammar. There's a grammar for media. And each media type, each medium has a different grammar, has different rules, different structures, different patterns that they use. And if we're going to be effective and we're going to be good, literate media consumers, we need to understand those rules. We need to understand that grammar. You're not going to be fluent in English until you understand English grammar. Well, you're not going to be fluent in media until you understand the grammar of those different media. Print has a very different set of rules, very different set of standards than the other forms, right? And that's actually the next unit we're going to get into is the print industry, the history of it, kind of the issues that are involved in the print industry. They have a different set of standards and rules that they have to play by for obvious reasons, Not only is their tools are different, but their audience is different. Same with radio and recorded music, right? The radio industry has a different set of rules than the film industry because they're using a very different approach. They're using very different tools, and they have a very different audience that they're not only intending to reach, but the audience that they're capable of reaching. When we talk about censorship, that's going to be like the key element we get at is the potential audience, not the intended audience. There's a reason why you can say fuck on Netflix, but you can't say fuck on NBC, right? The idea is that if I say fuck on Netflix, the only people who are watching are people who went out of their way to see it. You have to get an account. You have to pay for it. You have to open it up. On NBC, however, because it's a broadcast network, anybody with a television can watch it. So, you know, a 7-year-old kid can get access to NBC. And I realize, yes, today a 7-year-old kid can turn on the TV and turn on Netflix, but they can't pay for Netflix. Mom and dad had to buy Netflix or steal the password from somebody else, right? Mom and dad had to give that child access to Netflix. That's mom and dad's fault. Radio is broadcast. I can't say fuck on the radio because a kid could hear it. Anybody with a radio could hear it, no matter how old they are, no matter who they are. So I have a different set of rules. I have a different structure. I have a different way I approach it. It's very different describing something orally than it is to show something visually. Right? So there's a different grammar for film and television. There's a different grammar for the digital media that we consume, the internet and social media. You know, and again, it's all based upon not only the actual limitations of the medium itself, but also the availability of the medium. And so we're going to go through each one of those, right? We're going to talk about the print industry and their rules. We're going to talk about radio and recorded music and their rules. We're going to talk about film and television and digital. We're going to do that. But for now, it's important to recognize that there are differences. We have to see them differently, and we have to judge them differently. You know, you don't judge the you know, efficacy and the efficiency of Tide to the taste of Pepsi. They're different products, right? They can't live under the same rules. They can't live under the same system. They have very different purposes. Next, a couple questions for you guys. And again, I want y'all to, you know, talk and shit. We talk about commercial media. A couple of questions I want to ask you to kind of get us started in the idea of being more literate consumers. Do you think media should be judged the same as other industries and businesses? Right? That is to say, should we judge media the way we would judge car manufacturers, or the way we would judge soda manufacturers, right? Secondly, should concentrated media ownership hold special concern? And this is something I kind of primed you guys for the other day too, the idea of, should it bother us that only a few companies own so many of the media outlets and sources that are available? Is that something that should bother us? Should it bother us more than concentrated ownership in other industries? I mean, think about it. You know, if you drink pop, there aren't that many pop manufacturers. You got Coke, you got Pepsi, you got Royal Crown. Pretty much every type of pop you drink is a subsidiary of one of those. We don't get really upset about that. What do you guys think?
I think it's different because media stuff kind of sells ideas, so it kind of homogenizes the market of what's the old ideas being put out. So if one media conglomerate just kind of owns everything, only what they put out is what everybody's going to see. It's kind of like with Disney, how they acquired like Star Wars and Marvel and stuff. I think it kind of homogenized kind of maybe the movie market right now. There aren't many other like alternatives coming on, that kind of thing. So eventually it's only one output. It doesn't challenge any, they can't establish things. You don't get any other points of view.
Sure. Let me play devil's advocate with it for a minute, Mike. What's the negative effect on the common person to having limited entertainment companies, right? Because you use the Disney example, right? So like, if it ends up that there's Disney and then there's like one other company, I don't even know who would be at this point. If we get to the point where there's only 2 entertainment companies available, what's the harm to society in that? What do you think?
I think then kind of, because a lot of times life imitates art, so a lot of times it's almost like they're setting the precedence for kind of what the values of the culture are, because the information they put out, everybody's going to receive and then kind of be affected by whether they do it intentionally or not.
Because yes,
it's kind of like if you ever see like all the dystopic future movies, like corporations rule everything, and it's like Blade Runner, you know, like they just control how everybody perceives everything.
But that would never happen. That's fiction. That would never ever happen. Yes, right? Because art matters. Pop culture matters. Yes, it's just a stupid ass Transformers movie, but that influences people. It absolutely influences people. It plays a role in how we interact with our fellow man. Pop culture is still relevant. Pop culture is still influential. Right? What about the first question? Right? Should media be judged the same as other industries or businesses? Do you think media should be evaluated differently than we evaluate other businesses?
I think yes and no, because it is different, but at the same time, they are businesses trying to make money and should be kind of held to the same kind of standards because the products they're putting out are the same kind of for the. But I guess it's a different industry though, because it's not exactly putting out the same product all over the same time. And a lot of the times, those industries also have a huge media presence as well. So it's kind of a murky ground for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? See, man, the silence is even more awkward on Zoom. Like in class, it's an awkward silence when I do this, but like on Zoom, it's even fucking weirder. I don't like it. I don't like it. Somebody say something. Come on. Trent? Come on,
Something.
Trent. Ben, there you go. Bring it to me, Ben. What's up?
I just wanted to say something because you said someone say something.
God,
So something.
Ben, you smart ass. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I can't get mad at somebody being a smart ass. It's me. It's hypocritical as fuck. Yes. All right. I will say to go off of what Mike was saying. They are a business, and so we should evaluate media as a business, but it's also a very different type of business. The question is framed deliberately to be kind of misleading, to kind of box you in a little bit, because who's to say we can't judge industries on multiple different fronts, right? You can judge Pepsi for their business model and for their product. We do it all the time, right? We judge GM for its corporate responsibilities as well as for its product. I give a lot of money to companies I fucking hate, to be frank, because I like their product. I hate their company. I hate their business model. I hate their business practices, but I really need their product. Why can't we judge media the same way, right? I hate the business model of Disney from an ethical perspective, from a business perspective. But I need their product. I don't literally need it, but I feel like I need their product.
I can relate.
Yeah. I mean, when Disney bought 20th Century Fox, I went, no. Oh wait. Oh shit. I got really upset about the business merger, but really excited about the potential for stories that could come out of this and how movies are going to be able to integrate now.
My friends and I, we have this joke with Disney there that they're like Ego the Living Planet in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. The whole plan is just take over the whole universe and make it them.
Well, I have friends of mine who are also media professionals, and they refuse to get a subscription to Hulu for ethical reasons, right? They're like, I am not giving those fuckers a dime of my money. It doesn't matter what product Hulu puts out. Hulu has some good content. They've got some good shit, but they're not going to pay Hulu any money. They're not going to give them any money. And I do that in some cases too. There are some products I refuse to buy. I don't care how good it is because they violated my ethics or my morality so badly. I will not give them my money. Again, we do that with other products. I think it's reasonable to do that with media as well. So in some ways, yeah, we should judge media differently. But in some ways, we should also judge them as a business. You can look at the business approach and look at the content approach as separate entities. We do that with entertainers, right? Like right now, it's really fucking hard to be a fan of almost anybody because we're finding out they're all kind of shitty. Almost every celebrity you can think of has some horrible part of their past that we have to ask ourselves, like, all right, do we continue to support their art? Do we continue to support their work, even though they're a terrible person? I grew up loving Michael Jackson. I got weird. I got weird. I grew up watching The Cosby Show. What do I do now? You know, like, am I allowed to watch The Cosby Show anymore? Am I allowed to, like, listen to the Thriller album anymore? Because, like, I really want to, but fuck. How do I separate the creator from the creation? And again, we see the same thing from an industry perspective is, you know, can you love the product but hate the producer? I don't know. I honestly, I struggle with it myself. I legitimately don't know. Okay. A couple of other questions, right? And these are, again, things that we've touched on in the past, and these are relating to media bias, because again, it's one of the big topics that you hear is, you know, bias in the media, bias in the media. Number one is that bias real, or is that us projecting our biases and our sensitivities onto it? When we read a story and we go, oh, they're showing their bias, is it that they're really showing their bias, or that we're highly sensitive to it and we see things that aren't necessarily bias as bias? And again, think of this in terms of interpersonal relationships. If your friend is pissing you off, doesn't matter what they say, you're going to take it as them being a dick. Whether they're actually being a dick or not, you're going to perceive it that way. If you don't like person B, no matter what they say, you're going to see what they're saying is terrible, right? You're going to see whatever they say as being horrible. It's just a human thing that we do. So when we talk about media bias, I think one of the first things we have to concern ourselves with is, are we being fair in our assessment, or are we allowing our own bias to affect what we see as bias, right? The second question then is, should we even care? Who gives a shit? If media is a business, who cares if there's bias in it? We don't care about the bias of any other. Not to mention, we live in a free capitalist society. Okay, so be it. You're allowed to have biases, right? You're allowed to believe what you want to believe. You're allowed to put your money where your beliefs are. Should we care, right? If Disney wants to give $60 million a year to, you know, the Communist Party of China, should I give a shit? Should I care? It's their money. And third, are we being realistic with our judgments about bias? And again, we kind of mentioned this the other day. You know, media is run by human beings, and human beings have their own inherent biases. Is it realistic to say that once you become a journalist, you give up your humanity? Is it realistic to say once you become a filmmaker, you are no longer allowed to have the common assumptions and inferences and the common prejudgment typology of the human mind? Is that fair to them? What do you guys think of any one of these? Any one of these questions? I want to hear your take, guys. What do you guys think?
Well, I think the first one is a little bit of both,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of people out there that are biased in what they type or say or whatever. But at the same time, if we don't like something, we're just going to assume they're being biased, even if it might not be.
I agree with that.
I think you were saying like earlier in class about like the press being biased over media and like the different sources of media that we have, because like the Disney era isn't going to necessarily have too much of a bias, but like when you talk about like CNN or Fox or things like that, they're different levels of bias and like different things that influence in different kinds of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. We again, just like on the last slide, you know, we need to judge industries upon their own dynamics, but we also need to judge different types of media on their own dynamics. That media grammar concept. I will push back on one thing you just said, Lindsay. Disney sure as hell can have a bias, right? And employ that bias in their entertainment. This is one of the things that, again, I think it's easy. I use a lot of examples of journalistic issues with bias and framing because they're much more apparent. They're easier to see. But popular film has a ton of that, right? A ton of that. When American Sniper came out, right? The Clint Eastwood directed film about Chris Kyle, the American Sniper. When that came out, there was a lot of criticism of that movie of like, wow, this is really nationalistic. This is very one-sided and very kind of, I guess, troublesome, and how it's presenting this complicated issue of war. Clint Eastwood's latest movie, Richard Jewell, was very like heavy-handed on. It was very clearly a fuck you press, is what it was. It was a whole movie about how terrible the American press is. Even lighthearted children's movies. You know, my 7-year-old, my 6-year-old, we watch kids movies all the damn time. You ever seen WALL-E? I mean, WALL-E's got a pretty clear bias to it. There's a clear moral to that story.
Yeah, you caught me.
Well, and it's not just you, Lindsay. It's not just you. It's again, we all do that. We all do that where we watch entertainment and go, it's just entertainment. But I always get a kick out of, because I have small children and you know, we watch a lot of kids movies. I always think it's hilarious when people freak the fuck out about some subliminal, subtle messaging in kids movies. I don't know if you guys remember this, but when Frozen came out, right, Frozen 1, there were people who were convinced it was a plot to turn kids gay. Now, I've watched Frozen probably about 6 bajillion times because my daughters fucking love it. None of them are gay. How does that work? I still, to the life of me, can't figure out how a story about 2 sisters who realize they don't need a man to complete them is, I can't figure out how people think that's gay. It's because they're homophobic as shit and they're misogynistic. But like, there's nothing gay in the whole movie. There's nothing, like, even the snowman, right? The snowman is, yeah, he's a little, I don't like him, but he's not, like, there's nothing gay in the entire fucking movie. But people turn it into this like, they're trying to indoctrinate our children. I get that too a lot as a teacher. People are like, you're indoctrinating. No, I wish. Like, I really wish I had that ability. Is it really time to? Damn it!
Wait, hang on. You don't like Olaf?
I fucking hate Olaf. Are you kidding me?
Oh my god.
Olaf is an asshole.
No, he's not.
He is. He's a dick. Like, watch the movie. Olaf's a bad person. He's such a bad person, he's not even a person. How the hell is it 10:50 already?
No, he's not a person. He's a snowman.
Yeah, so he's a bad person because he's not even a person.
But he's not a person.
Yeah, exactly. He's really bad at being a person. Don't try me, Ben.
Yeah, yeah.
You ain't gonna win.
Yeah, okay.
Shit, I need a clock on my wall or something. My bad. I didn't realize it's 10:50 already. All right, guys. Well, on Monday, we'll continue this, I guess we'd call it discussion. Hopefully in person. We'll see how things go. I'll let you guys know as soon as possible if we do need to go back to Zoom. But for right now, let's just presume we're going to meet in person on Monday in the classroom. Okay. I'll put the recording of this up as soon as it's processed and shit. I'll put it on Moodle. Bye.